Now, to the debate over free speech in Australia and whether we need to reform Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act, which makes it an offence to offend, insult or humiliate on the grounds of race. The Institute of Public Affairs is leading the charge to change or indeed get rid of 18C, as it's known. They've commissioned more polling on this and found that over the last few months there has been an increase in the number of people who agree that at least offend and insult should be removed from the Act. It's now nearly 50% of those surveyed, according to Galaxy Research. Simon Breheny, Director of Policy at the IPA, is with me now. Simon, thanks for your time. Let me just ask you the question I'm sure many people want to know. This poll, what was the actual question you asked?
Yeah, look, the question we asked was about the very specific policy proposal that's currently before the Senate. There's currently a bill which proposes to remove the words offend and insult from that definition which you've just touched on. Currently, it's unlawful to offend, insult, humiliate or intimidate another person on the basis of race, colour or national or ethnic origin. So this is the law that's caught up Andrew Bolt back in 2011. We've had more recently the case of QUT students being caught for Facebook banter. We've seen Bill Leak dragged before the Australian Human Rights Commission under a complaint made against a cartoon that he had published in The Australian. So, frankly, I think that it's unsurprising that we're seeing an increase in the number of people that are in favour of change because of those cases. I think that's really focusing the mind of the Australian public on this issue.
So, but how do you frame that question that you're asking there? I mean, can you tell us what the question was in the poll?
Yes, I can. I've got the research right here with me, and you can go online to download all of the results of the questions that we asked. We've sampled more than 1,000 Australians, and there were two sets of questions we asked them. The first one was about the importance of freedom of speech generally, and overwhelmingly Australians have said that they think that freedom of speech is important. 95% of Australians surveyed have said that they think it's important. 57% of those have said that it's very important. And on the specific proposal as to whether or not they are in favour of removing the words offend and insult, as you said, 48%. So that's an extraordinary result, and it's up from November polling.
Sorry to harp on about this, but what's the specific question you asked on removing offend and insult? Can you just read out what the question was?
Yeah. So, look, it's a pretty straightforward question. It's just, do you approve or disapprove of the proposal to change the Racial Discrimination Act so that it is no longer unlawful to offend or insult someone because of their race or ethnicity? It will still be unlawful to humiliate or intimidate someone because of their race or ethnicity. So, splitting 18C into those two halves, offend and insult on the one hand, humiliate and intimidate on the other.
All right. Now, because it's not yet a majority, it's increased, as you point out, since you polled this or Galaxy polled this back in November. Do you agree it needs to be a majority before we are going to see real change on this?
Well, look, it's still a plurality, but yes, you're right. Of course, it's not a majority that are in favour of change under even this poll. It's getting pretty bloody close though, at 48%. And given that that is a plurality, I think that will play on the minds of the parliamentary committee that's currently considering these issues. It will be playing on the minds, I would have thought, of many MPs around the country who are looking at parties like One Nation, who are riding this tide of populism that we've seen right around the world, because I think that 18C is really a good example of quite an elitist project of the political class, and it's something that I think a lot of Australians think is just inappropriate. And that's why I think we're seeing this rising tide now of support for changes to Section 18C.
And I know you've been appearing before the Parliamentary Committee today that's looking into all of this. I suppose many are still wanting to see what is the key example of where this law, this 18C, part of the Act, has actually, I mean, you reference Andrew Bolt and Bill Leak. I mean, is Bill Leak ultimately, it didn't proceed, but with Andrew Bolt it did. Is that the example that you hold up as evidence as to why this needs to go?
I think there are a number of examples, but yes, you're right. In recent times, many of those cases have provided an impetus for change. The most significant of those, I think, is the QUT case. So the case, very briefly, was a case where a student was removed from an Indigenous-only computer lab. After he was removed, he posted on Facebook, QUT stopping segregation with segregation. Now, whether you agree or disagree with the policy that the university had in place, surely we should allow for debate amongst students about policies that apply to them, about whether or not computer labs should be reserved for Indigenous kids, whether they should be reserved for any particular ethnic minority. That to me seems like a completely reasonable discussion. And because of that post made way back on the 28th of May 2013, Alex Wood and several other students were dragged through what is still a legal process that is going on now through both the Human Rights Commission and the Federal Circuit Court. So I think most people look at that and say, well, that's just so inappropriate. And I think that's why, again, we're seeing this rising level of support for change. Because, you know, really, do we want to drag kids before the courts for making what is, at worst, Facebook banter?
Simon Breheny from the Institute of Public Affairs. This debate is continuing, we know. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate it.